G'day, Stu here from UAVfutures, and today, well, we're going to be having a look at something that I actually get requested all the time, and that is a kit. So the kit we're going to be looking at is the TS195, but what I get a lot of emails that say, Stuart, I want to get into drone racing, I want to build my own, I don't want to go out and pick all the individual components, and I don't want to buy like a bind and fly one that's ready-made. I want to pick one that's in a kit. So that's what we've got today. We're going to be taking a look at this bad boy right here. This is the awesome, well, from brand Awesome, the TS195. Now, of course, it doesn't come like this. I've already previously built it. I've just got to put my FPV antenna on there, and then we're ready to rock and roll. But what we're going to do, we're going to stick it on the bench. I'll show you how the kit comes. We'll break it down, and then sort of go through all the components, and then I'll talk about the final build and what I thought about it. So if you want to get into FPV drone racing, a kit might be a good way to go, you know. It's got everything. You know it's going to be all compatible with each other, and you might just want something that you can take out of the box, build like a bit of Lego, and then take it out and rip it around. Because I promise you, nothing feels more like satisfying than when you work really hard and you build your own quad, and especially that first time when you see it take flight, it's a pretty amazing feeling. Anyway, enough rambling from me. We're going to stick it on the bench with the magic of editing and see what it looks like when it was in the box, and then we'll go through the parts. All right, let's do it. So here it is on the bench. Look, it does come in this box. We're going to put these props out of the way, but it comes in a nice little package. Let's put it all out so we can see what we actually get. Alrighty, so here is everything spread out, and the first thing I'm going to say, it looks much better like this, but Stuart, isn't this a quadcopter? You know, isn't the TS195, isn't that a quad? You know, we've got 4 motors, yeah. Why do we have 8 arms? I was a little bit baffled. You actually get 2 sets of arms, and something very cool we're going to talk about in detail. Look at this arm. You know, what's going on there? We should be getting something a little bit crazy. So I'm excited about that, but let's have a bit of a brief overview of what you get, and then we'll jump in and we'll have a look at all the individual components. So you get the frame itself, so you can see you've got your 2 sets of arms here, and then you've got all your little pieces right here. So we're going to be going through the frame in a minute as well. Probably something exciting, you've got everything's in a nice cool gold and black color combo. I think there was a couple of others. I'll link them down below anyway for the different color combos. Now you've got the 4 motors right here. We're going to be looking at those. In the middle, this is where we've got our goods. So we've got our FPV camera, our ESCs, and then our flight controller Vtx. Our little omnidirectional FPV antenna at the back. You get a nice little pigtail, so we'll get the boring stuff out of the way. You do get all your little wires and connections and little pigtails and all that sort of jazz. You get some props, which we will be talking about. You get some motor protectors, which, to be honest, I don't know if I'm going to be using those on mine. I'm pretty happy to just to risk it without it. I never use those. And then you get a battery strap, and then all your screws and your little standoffs and that sort of jazz as well. So what we should do, let's waste no time. We're going to look at the frame itself, and then we'll probably break it down, look at the motors, and we'll look at the internal electronics. All right, let's have a look at the frame. Okie dokie. Now the frame itself is pretty simple. You can see there's not really too much to it, especially when you take out 1 set of those arms. Now let's have a bit of a look. So we'll get this part out of the way. This is pretty boring. Of course, you got your little, well, not boring, because I think, you know, it's nice to have a bit of bling. You've got your little screws right there and your standoff. So they're off to the side. This is the actual part in terms of the frame that I'm interested in. Now the biggest part with this frame, just in placing it out like this, something I didn't realize at the start, but just picking up all these little bits of carbon, had some nice gold trimming around them. So that looks fantastic. But one big thing, it's not pure carbon. So this is the second frame recently, actually, that I've had a look. The arms aren't pure carbon. So on the outside it looks like it's carbon fiber, and but actually in the middle you have a fiberglass mix. So that means, like, let's have a look at these arms actually. That means that, so this 4mm here, it's not as strong as a, let's zero this in. Here we go. Alrighty, oh, it's only 3.5mm actually. So we've got a 3.5mm arm right there, but it's not solid carbon fiber, and so you've got a little composite sandwich in the middle, and really that means it's going to be a little bit lighter. It might allow it to zip around a little bit more, but it's not strong. It's not as strong as full carbon fiber, so it is a little bit more breakable. So that's a little bit disappointing, and I was hoping that would just be in the arms. It doesn't look like it's the case. Every single little piece we've got here, now look, there's not really too much to go through in terms of the frame. This is your battery protector. This is your pretty much your base plate with your 2 little canopy mounts that go on right here. And then this part, these parts here, that's just for putting your camera or your GoPro on the top. So really, and this is a nice little brace that goes between it. Every single piece in here is just composite. So you've got carbon fiber. All these little plates, they're not as thick. I think they're only 1mm 1.5, gee, I'm all over the place. These ones are only 1.5 mils thick, which is a bit of a shame. If they were like this, you know, maybe 2 mils for these plates would be a little bit different, especially because they're not solid carbon fiber. That's a real big shame. It's going to be very interesting because in the durability books of things, you know, you're probably going to be busting some of these parts up. But something I do like, something I love, and something that I'm also a little bit confused by, I didn't realize you got 2 sets of arms, so I think that's absolutely awesome. Of course, you've got these straight ones right here. It's called the TS195 because once it's all built from motor to motor, you're going to have 195 millimeters from motor to motor, but these arms are right here. You know, they've got this strange, like, different effect. I really wonder, how is this going to mount? I'll flash some pictures on the screen anyway, some close-ups of these, but how is that going to actually affect your flight performance? Now, I love the fact, actually, that you've got some extra arms, because this is made of not carbon fiber, this is made of fiberglass and carbon fiber, and if you break one, it's nice to have a bit of a backup. But the one thing I don't understand, instead of all these, I think the arm's going to be what you're going to break the most. Instead of like 2 different sets, maybe just have 1 extra set of each. So I would probably either prefer just 6 of one type of an arm, whether it be 6 straight ones or 6 ones like this. I think 6 straight might be better, but I'm really excited to try the bent ones. But yeah, if you break one of these, it means you're going to have to replace all 4. But in saying that, they're designed for our 22 size motors, which is probably what we should look at next. So let's push this carbon fiber, excuse me, carbon fiberglass sandwich to the side and have a bit of a closer look at some of the electronics. Alrighty, so here's the motor on the bench, but the first thing, well, let's get these props out of the way. You only get 2 sets of props. They're nothing too special. They look like the old style dowel tri-blades, 50/50 tri-blades. Not too exciting. I prefer cyclones, and I'll link those down below. But look, props are something, it's not really a big expense. You're probably going to be buying more props anyway. So I'm happy that you get 2 sets. It's better than 1. But they're not the best prop, but look, it's really not a big deal. It's like a couple of bucks to get a little upgrade. Anyway, let's move on to the actual motors. Alrighty, so the motors themselves, as well as being this funky sort of golden color, I wonder if all of them come in the color schemes actually, but these are 2205 motors, 2600 kV, which, to be honest, for a cheaper kit, I think the higher kVs are definitely a better way to go, because I don't think these things are going to have the most performance, and I think by putting up the kV, you're definitely going to be giving it a bit of a better chance of putting some of those higher thrust numbers out. Now, 2205 is pretty much the standard size for a motor nowadays, maybe a 2206. And I think this is going to be pretty fun if the quadcopter turns out to be pretty light. Now on the top, something they did miss a little bit. I wish they came with some lock nuts. Instead, you get these old school, like aluminium or aluminum, however you want to say it. You get these old school style little spindlets, or whatever you want to call them, on the top. That's a bit of a shame. We don't want to be using these. This is like 3 years old. Just give us some lock nuts that we can tie down and make it really tight. Anyway, let's move on and have a look at these 2 bad boys. Alrighty, so we're going to have a look at the ESC first. So this is the ESC. It's a 4-in-1. It's going to mean it's going to make for a very clean, very nice little build. Oh, something I should also mention too, because it's a 4-in-1, that means we need some longer wires on our motors, which is exactly why these motors have a little bit of some longer wires. Anyway, so it's a 4-in-1, nothing too special. BLHES takes a 2 to a 4S LiPo, so we're probably going to be rocking it on 4S, and you do get this nice little part here. It allows it to easily connect to your flight controller. So you don't have to do too much soldering in terms of the signal pads. You simply run that up straight to your flight controller. Everything else is pretty much very easy. Now, one limitation, look, 20 amp constant is not too much. I think the burst rating is 25 or 30 amps. That's probably going to be okay. I don't think these motors are absolute powerhouses, and I do think this is sort of more aimed at the beginner who wants to build their quadcopter, you know, maybe a first drone or something like that. So look, I would like it if there were this amperage was a little bit higher, but you can't complain, you know, too much. I guess you get what you pay for. I know in the past I've used a ton of 20 amp ESCs, and I think when I started I used like 12 or 6 amps or something like that. So 20 amps is probably enough, especially comparing it, like I mentioned, with the motors. If you put more serious motors on here, you might run the risk of burning out one of these ESCs. Anyway, let's move over to the Flight Controller Vtx. Alrighty, so here's our flight controller Vtx, and you know, it's an F3 flight control. It's rocking Betaflight, nothing too special, pretty standard sort of stuff. It would be nice if it was an F4 board, but I guess, you know, for a beginner kit, it's okay. You've got your USB port on the bottom. And speaking of the Vtx, that's where things get pretty nice. Now, you do have all these connections around here, And that's why you get all these little cables. So it's going to make for a super nice, snug little build, especially when you're connecting like your ESCs. All you're going to have to do is plug something like this in. It's going to connect straight up to your board. You don't have to do some soldering. And I think in terms of the really small soldering. So I think in terms of that, a board like this might be good for beginners. Now, here's probably the most exciting part when I talk about the VTX. So like I mentioned before, you've got your button. It's got 40 channels, including race band. It's got switchable powers. Now in the VTX, probably one of my favorite things that I sort of didn't pick up at the start, I was wondering why we got all these different connections. And check this out. Either, I really like you get the options here. You can have something that goes, I think this one goes on the back right this. So if you want to have your Vtx antenna coming out the back, you can either do that. If you want to get one like this, you can direct solder this in, so it's going to come out the top. Or, probably my personal favorite, I wish I could just actually buy a whole bunch like this. I wish this is how all VTXs came. I can just simply solder in this little pigtail, and that's sort of going to, once it's soldered in, going to give me a little bit more flexibility in terms of in a crash, hoping nothing breaks, it doesn't snap off anything, doesn't snap off the board, because the last thing you want is for this bit to snap off, because if that happens, you're definitely out of luck. So, look, I'm a big fan. I wish more VTXs shipped with this sort of pigtail. I think that's a nice little bit of innovation. Alrighty, so now moving on, this is our FPV camera. Look, I don't know how good this is going to be. It's probably going to be pretty generic. It's a HS1177 style, look, which is pretty much the standard that everybody's using now. I'm happy to say it is a CCD camera, so we should be getting no jello when we're flying around. We should be getting some good wide dynamic range, and it should be able to take like a nice voltage range as well from 5 to 22 volts. So that's pretty much perfect. We should be getting a good image, and look, I'd be happy to fly with some of these on my quad. And then I guess the last few little things like we spoke about, so you get your little Xt60 connector. That looks like it's pretty much ready to be soldered up. I'm going to obviously be putting my own solder on there and making sure I do everything nice and snug. You've got your little FPV antenna right here, so like we mentioned at the start, that's circular polarized. Some of the other little bits of junk that I don't think I'm really going to use, like we mentioned, you've got your motor protectors. But overall, look, I think, we've got a lot of stuff when I put it all together like this, but I think this kit has some merits. I like that we get 2 sets of arms. I like the components, and I especially like the VTX idea and how you can mount it. The motors, look, they're probably so-so. I say the power's not going to be terrible, but it's definitely not going to be the fastest thing that you've seen. I love the fact that we get some different types of arms, but I do wish you got spares. But my biggest gripe is you don't have, it's not proper solid carbon fiber. So that part's a little bit of a shame. I wish they would change that, because it wouldn't make it too much more expensive. Look, it does make the build lighter, and they say on the website, new 30% lighter carbon fiber or something like that, but that's just because it's a fiberglass mix. Definitely not as strong as if it was solid. So that's probably my biggest grumble right there. But if you were looking to get a kit and you wanted to put something together that was relatively easy, you needed to do a little bit of soldering but not too much, something like this is going to be perfect if you want to dabble in building your own quadcopter. Okie dokie, there's all the parts, but with the magic of editing, let's check out what it looks like when it's all put together in 3, 2, 1, boop! Alrighty, so there it is on the bench, all built up. Thanks very much, computer, and the cameraman right there. Very quick editing, but what are some things? Let's talk about some of the pros, because I did really like some things in this build, and then there's also some things that are kind of baffling me. So let's start it off with the goods. So number one, it went together seamlessly. So it was really easy to build. You had minimum soldering tabs. The only parts you really had to solder in were the motors, and everything else was just sort of plug and play. So that was fantastic. If you're scared of soldering, definitely a kit like this is going to help, especially with those little ports and plugs. Everything seemed to fit quite nicely when you're just plugging it all together. But in saying that, there were a few little hiccups we had across the way. So, soldering in your, I chose to solder in the pigtail, because I thought, I think pigtails are a good way to stop your VTX from breaking, because otherwise you're going to have to hang it out the back. But if you chose one of those parts where it just simply stuck right up from the top, and you'd soldered that in, it's going to make that flight controller, it's not going to fit. It's a very bad, they shouldn't include that, because if you put that in by accident, you think, oh gee, that's the type I want that's going to stand straight up. There's no actual space. You'd have to grind the board out, or, there's no actual hole. You would have just messed up your entire build, and there's no real, warning to say don't put that part in. For me, I put the pigtail in, and look, there's not really anywhere to put it, so there's no little attachment or anything like that. It'd be nice if this little top plate on the top right here had a little plug you could plug it through. I think that would be much better. Number two, one part that I want to point out is it was a really tight fit when it came to putting these standoffs in just here, and also being able to plug your board in and put all the plugs in, especially this one at the front. I felt like it was almost pinching some of the wires at the front right there, so I don't think that's really a good thing. The third thing, there was actually seems to be more problems I found with this once I actually built it than I thought. The third thing, look how far out your camera is actually sticking. So in a frontal crash, this is meant to be protecting your camera, but in a big crash, you know, your lens is going to be absolutely busted. And then here's probably the strangest thing. Of course, I went with the arms. I wanted to try something a little bit funky, but I'm going to have to change that because look, it's a very clean build, and I do admit that, you know, looking at these pictures on the screen, it does look super smick, but let's say you go to spin it up. I did not put on these things because honestly I think they're just going to add extra weight. I think they're sort of garbage, to be honest. But if we're going to spin this, if this prop is all the way down, the props are very tight to put on actually, so obviously if I can push this all the way down, but you're really not getting too much clearance there. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's catching on the motor wires. So regardless of how you're going to do it when this is spinning around, that's actually making, you know, it's connecting right there. You can see it just a little bit. That's a bit worrying because you don't want to be giving this thing some full stick, getting some deflection in your props, and you're going to cut across your motor wires right there. So that part is a definite massive boo-boo. I do think it looks fantastic. I really love the way it looks, and I loved how easy it was to build, but look, there's just a few things that need to be fixed up. So number one, look, of course the carbon fiber definitely needs to lose the fiberglass, which is a massive flaw in here. Number two, you are missing some things like, you know, the Vtx antenna. That would be nice if it had a little place to connect. It's too snug to try and fit some of the wires in there. You really have to cram them in, even though it's easy to connect them. And the weirdest thing is, I don't want to be cutting any of these when using this type of arms. What I'm probably going to do in part two is invert the arms, have them up here doing something kind of crazy. I don't think that's how it's designed, but why don't we try something a bit crazy? Because in its current state, I wouldn't feel comfortable to fly this, you know, I'd have to change some things up. So I'm definitely going to change the way the arms go, find some sort of jerry ways I can put this together and, you know, see what happens. Alrighty, so there it is. There's my review with the awesome, or the name awesome anyway, the TS195 from Awesome. And is it awesome? I'm going to say not really. Look, I like what it's trying to do, and I definitely think kits have a big role to play in the future, and I'd like to see more kits out there. I want to try and get some more on the show, but in its current form, I just think it's just got too many things wrong with it than right. So there's more wrong than more right. So let's talk about what I do like. It was really easy to go together. You know, the components look like they're average, so they're definitely not bad. They're not fantastic, but you know, you're probably getting what you pay for. But the parts I didn't like was pretty much the overall finished build, and the number one worst thing about this build is the carbon. So this whole thing is fiberglass, carbon fiber fiberglass, which is a real shame because, you know, most of the quads on the wall, it wasn't until the Wizard V2, which I've still got to do the review of that. That one tricked me as well, but I was paying attention for this one. You know, fiberglass just isn't as strong, which is a bit of a shame. It's probably going to break more. And number two, you can really mess your build up if you put in the wrong Vtx antenna, or if you just went and flew it like this, you would definitely be cutting some wires. So there's a few little nuances, and no camera protection either. A few little nuances that I think people need to get right, or the company needs to get right. Take this one back to the drawing board, fix those problems, because look, it wouldn't take much, and then I think you'd have a pretty awesome kit. But number one, if you guys are going to do anything out there, the makers are, you know, awesome, the TS195s, if you're going to do anything, definitely change it and make it full carbon fiber. Anyway, hope that you guys enjoyed that. Subscribe for more FPV related content. I'm going to link this down below if you are interested in one, and definitely stay tuned for part two, because what I want to do, look, in its current state, I don't think I want to fly it around like this. I'm going to flip the arms upside down and have like a bit of a crazy pod where you know, something a little bit crazy that I definitely don't recommend most people do, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And then we'll take it out, thrash it around, and to be honest, it's probably going to end up in a few pieces, and we'll give Grumpy Trevor a crack at it as well. Anyway, subscribe for more FPV related content, and as always, happy flying. Probably, you know, what do you guys want to see? Do you want me to, you know, I can put the straight arms on there if you want, but if you prefer me to sort of flip these upside down and, you know, have them coming up the other way and having a bit of a crazy prop line, you know. So drop that in the comments down below. Curved arms on, upside down, or just the plain, boring old vanilla straight arms. Let me know. Alright, happy flying. Alrighty, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. Definitely subscribe if you're new to the channel and check out these videos. And I'm also going to leave a little link here to my Patreon page, because I've got some fantastic Patreon supporters and I like to give back to them as well. So if you want to join the UAVfutures family, there's things like bonus velcro straps, little bundles of FPV goodies and things like that that also get sent out. Anyway, happy flying.